Hey folks, and welcome. It is the Counter Clipping Show for January 3rd, 2022. Happy New Year. It is, well, beef jerky time was a couple of days ago. Those of you who haven't seen Trading Places, I got some weird looks from, I kept doing that on New Year's Eve. So, but, you know, those of you who have seen Trading Places know where I'm coming from on that. So welcome everybody. Today we are going to be talking about dated war games, and I know we've talked sort of about that before, but I'm going to take a little bit of a different angle on it tonight. Eggy Cricktal, I believe the Armchair Dragoons events are on sale now or will be super duper soon. Don't quote me on that exactly, but should happen anytime. We are drinking a Christmas present Laphroaig quarter cask. This is no age statement on this, which typically, and in this case I'm guessing it does, means it's quite young. Laphroaig can get away with that because it's super peaty, and strongly peated whiskeys hold up fairly well when they're relatively young. And it's bottled at 48%, so I am putting a little bit of water into it. It is, like every Laphroaig I have had, absolutely marvelous. We are clipping SPQR Deluxe, whatever version it is right now. I did have a problem with one of the counter sheets. One of the counter sheets, only one, was one of those counter sheets where the first row of counters is wider than all the other rows, which is a problem I've seen on GMT counter sheets in the last few years. I've never called them to whine about it, but it's irritating. It's less irritating here than it would be in a game with significant stacking. GBOH doesn't really have significant stacking. We will be finishing this tonight. I've actually only got about half a counter sheet left. So we will not be finishing organizing it tonight, because that is an entirely different thing. And right now I have this thing in 5 counter trays, pending printing the baggie labels and organizing them into baggies. That is a temporary solution, so I'm going to spend a couple of hours at some point this week doing that. Some of it's done already, but a lot of it's not. And I do baggies, in this case, by, like, faction, if you will, and unit type. So this guy, for example, these are leaders. Leaders get their own bag. So these guys, for example, would be Samnite Legions. So Samnite Legions, regardless of weapon type, would get their own little baggie. And then I would figure it out. Like, Cretan Slingers are available in, like, a bunch of different colors, for example. So, the channel of the week is Catacycsm Now. Somebody who is here with us tonight, by the way. So welcome. I am not sure if I have had Catacycsm Now as the channel of the week prior to tonight, then it is somehow not on my list. Stranger things have happened. Those of you who watched the last Blitzkrieg unboxing video might remember that I already did a last Blitzkrieg unboxing video, so we don't really need another one, but I did another one anyway, and when I searched for it, it didn't come up, or I was being a dolt at that time and didn't see it. The latter is more likely. So, please do, before we get started, please do thumbs up the video. Please do subscribe to the channel if you are not already subscribed. It's my guess that the vast majority of folks who are here tonight are, in fact, already subscribed, but not everybody is, I'm sure. So please subscribe. Please click the little bell icon to get notified when new content and stuff comes out. Speaking of new content, we'll be talking some about that later tonight. We resume, after our holiday break this week, we resume our OCS game of Blitzkrieg Legend. I anticipate that we probably aren't going to be playing that more than another few weeks, but we'll see exactly how that happens. The War in the Desert game that we have been playing has been determined to have been gratuitously messed up, so we are not going to probably continue that. We'll have that discussion tomorrow. So for those of you who tune in to the weekly stream with Dan, which has traditionally taken place on Wednesday nights, we are moving it back a day and forward an hour. So we will be on at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow rather than on Wednesday. That is a permanent change until our gaming schedule changes again. So Wednesday was the traditional night for this game, and we're moving back to that now that, like, people's kids have gone back to school and stuff like that. So let me take a moment to say hello to everybody who is here so far. John Sy, Michael Potts, Vince Reese, Strelnikov, Joe Faust from sunny Akron, Ohio. It's actually, we actually kind of had winter weather here today for the first time, and not really the first time, but the first time that it felt like it to me here in central Ohio. And I know up in Akron there, you know, probably pretty similar to where we're at. David Imperato, Stephen Roberts, Tim Zales, Carl Kretter, John Madison, Todd Walser, Mike Anthony, if I haven't said hello yet, Messing Up Rules, Daniel Silverthorne, Charles Latorra, Jeff Anderson, Joe Perez, William Bird, John Longshore is in the house, James Whitmer, John Clark, Ken Porter, Manders, Chad Canady, Bill Simone, James Whitmer, I think I got you already, Brian Gash, Iggy Crichtal, whose question I've already answered, Sheriff Harry, Jason R. LaRiviere, Michael Schmaus, Cole Bieri, Tom Borman, Rick Cox, Half-Ass Gaming, welcome John, Board Game Bloke, William Bird, Husa Maldonado, Hethwill is in the house, Krusty Captain. Let's see if there's anybody else here. We may have caught everybody. Chris K, haven't got you yet. Henry Sikorsky, not sure if we got you yet. So John Sy, I don't know if it's sunny in the Philippines right now. It's not sunny here. So I'm sure it will be sunny tomorrow if it was not sunny today. I mean, it's summertime there. You guys are in the southern hemisphere, right? Maybe not. I don't even know without looking at an actual map. Joe Wood. So welcome everybody to the stream and thanks for stopping by. So there's a sale video in the works, and I had hoped to get it done for like over the Christmas break. I did take some time off work, as you'll be aware if you tuned into previous streams. David Thompson, thank you for stopping by. I got nothing meaningful channel-wise. That's not quite true. I got some quickie edited stuff done, but I got no like serious content done. So, well, I have started to line that video up. I did not make any actual progress on it. So we do have unboxing video. We have one unboxing video that is already set up for this week. I'd hope to get another 2 out, and I have a couple more to film of classic products that have been lent me. Doug Sunseth, thank you for stopping by. So apparently Manila is north of the equator. So well, it's still probably sunnier than here because it wasn't sunny here at all. Scott Bell, thanks for stopping by. So blame the American educational system for me not knowing what latitude that the Philippines are at. And I'm not going to stop the stream to go look that up. So, John Longshore has received Hollow Legions. So I have, mine is coming by way of Fucko, and it has, I don't know if he's even gotten a shipping notification yet. For those who are on the fence about this, I might as well mention it because my copies are already paid for. Sacred Oil, the 3rd volume in the 1985 series from Thin Red Line Games, is up for sale. So, I mean, it might even be gone already. I don't know. That would be not out of character, totally on brand for those guys to have already sold out. But if you're interested and it's still available now, get it now, because it won't be available for very long. And they print a ludicrously small number of extra copies that didn't get accounted for in pre-orders. So yeah, we're gonna finish this before 9 p.m. tonight, I'm pretty sure. So Hollow Legions, other than an unscheduled reprint of Doomed Battalions, Hollow Legions will give me all the ASL core modules, and pretty much, you know, I'm happy to pick up whatever they want to put out, like module-wise they want to pick out. I don't pick up all the scenario packs, just because I can't keep track of them. But any modules they want to put out, historical stuff, whatever, I'll just buy. But I'm pretty much set after Hollow Legions. It's yet another 6 or 8 ASL counter sheets that I'll have to stick in the already overstuffed ASL counter sheet box of stuff that's not clipped yet. But at some point we'll get to it. I'm actually kind of tempted to throw everything in baggies and throw everything back in the original boxes to try and minimize the enormous amount of shelf space that ASL eats, but I think that would be a futile effort and ultimately frustrating, and I would just basically be redoing work later on. So I do have Hakapala. I'm not really happy with the job they did on the fins. I think they're frankly overpowered, And Bayonet Brant, thanks for stopping by. Brant, can you answer the question of whether AC/DC events are already for sale or not? I thought I saw posting that they were, but I could be nuts. A lot of stuff going on here. 6 Actual is also in the house. And Scarabus Driver, thanks for stopping by. Yeah, I would like to. So we have a because of the way liquor sales work here in the great state of Ohio, it's very difficult to get a lot of non-standard expressions from Scotch distilleries. I am fortunate to have been able to get Laphroaig Quarter Cask. I'm not sure I've ever seen a Laphroaig Cask strength here in Ohio. However, eventually, I'll end up going to Chicago again, or we'll field trip down to Kentucky, where I can actually get Scotch. And certainly, expressions of Laphroaig that I cannot get in Ohio would definitely be on a want list. But then again, you know, Scotch is not the cheapest booze you can get. So I'm not going to go down there and spend $1,500. So I'm only probably going to walk out with 4 bottles or something like that. One of which I'll tell you right now will be Laphroaig, which is from Tobermory, but it's peated. It's wonderful. I cannot get it in Ohio. It has literally never been, a bottle of it has never been seen in an Ohio liquor store. So, okay, so event tickets are in fact open. So for those who don't know, Brant can point you to the actual, well, he can't actually point you to the actual schedule. Nevertheless, go to the Armchair Dragons website and you can find the actual schedule of events. I'm running some things. There's some talk stuff, some interviews, and an OCS boot camp, which is kind of traditional for me to do at these things. On that subject, and I'm not going to actually show off the work in progress here, but I've been sharing a couple of little previews on social media of a new, more formal and much more structured OCS tutorial series that I am working on. So it's going to be a big project. I have the first episode scripted and out for vetting with the OCS rules experts to make sure I don't say anything stupid. I'm comfortable on the rules, but what I'm afraid of, and this has happened before, is there'll be some idiosyncratic way that we happen to play here that I will mistakenly say is the way it works in the rules, and I'll be wrong about that. I've been caught pants down on that, and I don't want to do that. So what I am running, we'll probably do Smolensk. Maybe we'll do something different this time. Maybe we'll do Sicily 2 instead of Smolensk, because we've always done Smolensk. Or maybe we'll do one of the Smolensk scenarios. But it's going to be one of the relatively small ones, because we're not going to be able to like play out in the slot that we have. We're not going to be able for me to do all the talking and play out an actual turn. So it is going to be instructional and not a competitive game. Did I get these mixed up? Nope, we're good. So Stigler, where's Stigler in the house? Yes, he is in fact in the house. So if Sacred Oil is still available at this exact moment, then I'm pretty sure that's a record. Last 100 Yards is a really good reputation. I'd really kind of like to check it out, but at the same time, it's in that very crowded World War II tactical space, and I simply do not have room for another World War II tactical experience. Thomas Bandy on BCS. So I think one of my 2022 goals is to get BCS to the table again. I think that's going to end up being Brazen Chariots, but I'd kind of like it to be Last Blitzkrieg. We'll see how that happens. So we've got like an OC right now. This is what's happening. We've got like an OCS night and not OCS night, and they're 2 different groups. Okay. The OCS night, we're playing Blitzkrieg Legend. My guess is that the player playing the Allies is going to probably not want to continue after another 2 or 3 turns because they're beginning to get rolled up. So after that, it is my intention to flip that into Third Winter. For a couple of reasons. One, to get some practice on the higher level command rules for the Soviets in advance of Winterfest, at which I will be playing the Soviets in the playtest, one of the playtest games of Forgotten Battles, which is the next Tony Burkett design. It is the 4-map, if you picture the 4-map section that is Third Winter, there's 4 maps immediately to the north of that. That's Forgotten Battles. And it's the same time period, September 43 to, September 43 to April or May of 44. So there was a BCS tournament planned for Winter Offensive, which I think would have turned out really well. People like tournament play. A lot of games are cut. Well, old SPI games are kept afloat at in tournament play at places like WBC. So I think that's great. Now, I am not comfortable. Daniel Berger, if somebody else wants to do BCS, I'd consider signing up for that. For those who haven't seen it, check out the Tabletop's Edge. He has been a Channel of the Week recipient in the past. And he is doing a wonderful play-by-play, very detailed playthrough of Last Blitzkrieg using the current BCS rules, which are, not radically different from the ones that released with Last Blitzkrieg, but there's a lot of additional refinements that have occurred in those rules, and I think it does make a difference. So through February, that's basically my gaming plan on the OCS night. Now, we're probably going to pull down War in the Desert, our current Europa game, because we broke it. We've discovered that we made a tragic rules error in not allowing the Axis to have enough naval transport points to move all their stuff down to Africa. And by, I think we're in July of 41, that has kind of broken the whole thing. So we're going to Winter Offensive, John Madison, Winter Offensive. Let's be clear. I don't want to misstate this. MMP's Winter Offensive event has been canceled, so nobody is going to Winter Offensive. Chad Kennedy asked if there's any chance Forgotten Battles is released in 2022. I would say that the timetable on that is really tight, and I doubt that that's, this is not official word. This, yes, I have been talking to those guys, but those are, I think that seems unlikely, right? That's not official information or anything like that. Third Winter got turned around pretty fast, however. So if they decide to wrap Forgotten Battles in the next, say, 3 to 6 months, then a 2022 release is not impossible. It's a COVID cancellation. Now, they didn't say, and I didn't inquire, and I didn't want to inquire as to exactly what the dynamic was there. Was it some kind of restriction that was being put into place by the state of Maryland or the county or something? I don't know. So, who knows? But, hopefully we'll all get back to Winter Offensive in January of 2023 now. So, that is damned unfortunate because it's a really nice event. And, I wouldn't go to Winter Offensive and play OCS, right? Because, it's a short event, and OCS games are big, but it's not really a short event. It's an average event, right? But it's not a long event at which you could get a big OCS game in. But I would consider playing BCS. And failing that, I would just do Great Campaigns of the American Civil War again. So I mentioned that there is, and I'll give you this piece of tidbit information. I'm working on this outline for the series of OCS instructional videos, right? And like I said, I just started. There's certain parts of it that can be kind of mass produced, like the the beginning sections and the end sections and stuff like that, and the please support the channel part of that. That I can do once, but there's still a substantial amount of stuff in the middle of the episodes that need to be scripted. I'm going to insist that I go in with a script that's at least many episodes ahead on that, because if my attention drifts, which I think I'm safe from for the next couple of months, but if my attention drifts or if something comes up where I have to do something else, I don't want to lose the thread, right? That's kind of what happened with Paths of Glory, And, you know, that went on so long that, you know, at the end of that process, it was like, well, it's been a year and a half since I've played Paths of Glory, right? So, all right, so Marty Sample says Niagara Board Gaming Weekend was canceled. Was supposed to be at the end of January. So I'm supposed to have a conversation with the people from Buckeye Game Fest later this week. So we're still planning on doing that. If anyone is interested in coming to Columbus, Ohio, Monday through whatever it is in April, I guess I got to look this date up now that I've said that. Okay, so Buckeye Game Fest 2022 is April 7th through the 10th, but the War Room opens on Monday, April 4th, so we'll have an entire week. If somebody wants to play a big game, and this is actually, you know, assuming we don't get canceled, this is where BCS maybe looks like a good idea. So, well, Henry, I think the difficulty in this case was timing. I know that the GCACW people have pivoted and are going to offer a digital event, but it won't be MLK weekend. I mean, that's only a couple of weeks away, right? So, Strelnikov might try to make BGF. So, anybody that wants to go to BGF, please email me at ardwulfslair@gmail.com, all one word, no apostrophe or anything like that, and let me know what you're interested in playing, and I'll try to coordinate that. Right now, and again, I haven't had the convo with them yet, so right now I don't have any information as to what is actually happening, but in order to figure that out, I need to know who is going to be there. So let me know if you want to come to BGF. And it's, you know, it's a big deal to the convention to sell hotel rooms, right? So if we can get, say, 15 people to, you know, coming in from out of town to sell hotel rooms, then that will be a huge incentive for Buckeye Game Fest to keep doing the War Room, right? Ohio is mandating masks when you're up and about. As far as I'm aware, they're not going to mandate masks while you're sitting down playing. That's pretty typical everywhere right now here in Ohio. So the Armchair Dragoons event calendar covers basically every wargaming event that we know about that hasn't been canceled yet, and it is linked in the video description, so please go check that out. As long as the Armchair Dragons maintain that calendar, I will keep it in the video description because it's super, super, super useful. And I'm sure that Brant can accommodate folks at Buckeye Game at the Armchair Dragoons digital event as well. So, and you know, I would have said I'll run GCACW, but you know, that when I committed to that, when I had to say, you know, call Brant up on the phone and say, here's what we're going to do, or when he called me and asked what we were going to do, as far as I knew, Winter Offensive was still happening that same weekend with its extensive, very extensive slate of GCACW content. So, Ryan Havanas, if you're in Northeast Ohio, check out Warzone Matrix just north of Cleveland Hopkins Airport, if that's convenient at all. So, the Buckeye Game Fest is going to be at the Hyatt Regency in downtown Columbus. I am not the right person to ask about wheelchair accessibility, to be honest, but I have been going to that convention center since 1996, at least once a year, for almost every year. And I feel like if you stay at the Hyatt, that it's pretty accessible. That's my feeling without ever having walked the place, trying to figure out to what extent that's true. But you could always call them. So it'd be great, John, if you could come down. There is a food court there, right there, literally right around the corner from where the gaming happens. So to like eat, you do not need to, you literally go out of the gaming room, walk down the corridor, and there's a bunch of food court type places, including like an ice cream place and a Subway and a couple of other places. And one of my favorite Indian restaurants in town, it's not really a restaurant, right? It's a stall in a sort of a mall food court without the mall, but their food's really good. And a bunch of pizza place and an Asian place. I don't want to call it Chinese because it's kind of a grab bag Asian, but yeah. But let me know again, ardwulfslair@gmail.com if you're planning on coming to Buckeye Game Fest, and we'll work it out. We've got some mystery units here. Columbus is no, BGF is not. So Buckeye Game Fest is a general board game convention. Okay, so the way it will work out is that there will be a big room with 200 people in it. I'm completely guessing at the number, but last time I think it was about 350. So I'm going to guess and say they probably draw half this year. So it's going to be a big room with a couple hundred people playing board games, Euros, train games, that, you know, Formula Day, that kind of stuff. But then there will be another room, which will be a dealer's room. There will be about 4 to 10 vendors there selling various things. Enterprise Games usually shows up. Don't have a confirmation from Don this year on that, but I imagine he'll be there. He was at Origins, so. And then there'll be another room. Now that, like, the Buckeye Game Fest part of it opens on Thursday, and it's a Thursday through Sunday convention, exactly like you would typically see at a convention. But the War Room opens on Monday, so you can come in first thing Monday morning, start setting up, play a game all week, tear it down on Saturday, and get quite a large game in, right? Now, I think if you... I think you would have problems. So there are actually... There's another hotel attached to the Hyatt via the food court. It's a Drury Inn. And I think that the Drury Inn, you would have issues with wheelchair accessibility. So the convention in Sandusky is Winterfest. That is in February. I don't have... Brant, is that on the calendar? I think that's on the calendar, because I gave you the dates, I thought. It's the weekend after Valentine's Day, thank God. I won't have to get in trouble again. But it's a full week, Friday night to the following Sunday event. And it is in a Best Western in February in, you know, a Sandusky, Ohio, which is otherwise unoccupied in February. So the hotel's pretty cheap. If anybody's interested in going to that, let me know. I am already talking to a couple people about Winterfest. But there might be some people showing up that need stuff to do, and I might be able to help line that up for them if it comes to that. I've heard good things about the Drury Inn, actually, but I've never personally stayed there. And then I moved here, so I didn't need to stay there. So, yeah, I know Marty's been there multiple times, so I think he's right. So to answer the question, no, but BGF is largely a non-wargaming event. But then in that war room, there will typically be between 2 and 4 big games set up. And then there will be a pretty constant stream of smaller games that can be set up, played, taken down in the space of a day or a few hours or whatever. That will also get played in that space. But my... I'm planning on, so John, I'm planning at this point, right? I'm planning on going to WBC, but I don't know what that looks like right now. That might look like a Saturday day trip or a leave Friday, come back Sunday type of thing, but I am planning on being there. So hopefully we can say hi when that happens. I'll be super easy to find because I'll be wearing the sweet Ardwulf's Lair merchandise. So, and there's a Facebook page. Honestly, the best place to get a hold of the Winterfest people, search for Winterfest Wargaming, is the Facebook page. So there's a website too, but getting into the back end of the website is a pain, historically been a pain in the ass. Sorry, John, but it is. But it's true. And I understand the reasons why, because you got to keep out the spammers, but it's historically been a pain in the ass. But the Facebook group is there's plenty of folks to pay attention to that. So yeah, so Sandusky is home, as John alludes. Sandusky is home to the Cedar Point Amusement Park, which is a big kind of roller coaster centric amusement park. I haven't been there in a long time, but you know they close for the winter, so the Sandusky's pretty much a ghost town during that time. So the Best Western is, you know, it's an older Best Western. It's not like lavish or anything, but they do have breakfast and they do have coffee, and the bathrooms are clean and the rooms are decent. And like the doors have locks and, you know, all that stuff. So none of the well, I wouldn't say none of the complaints that we've had. There are some weird issues there, right? Like the room that's being renovated, but it's been being renovated for like the last 10 years, and no visible progress has ever been made. So a lot of like the condiment coolers and stuff that are supposed to be in that room are in fact in the wargaming room, taking up space. None of this has created a huge headache for it, but it's funny. Scott Bell will be running 878 Vikings for its third year. That is I haven't played that. That's one of those Wario block things from Academy Games. I've played the 1775 one and I actually like it. It's pretty good. So well, John, if you're going to come, you might as well stay for the whole thing. I'm like 2.5, 3 hours away, so I can day trip it. And, you know, depending on what the money looks like, that might end up being what I end up wanting to do. On the other hand, if I go as, like, Ardwulf of Ardwulf's Lair, then I can safely day trip it. If I want to play stuff, then I'm going to want to be there the whole time. So I'm not committing to that. That's just kind of like my minimum expectation at this time. I am not aware that there are dates for Tempe yet. I might be wrong about that. If I am, then information has come out very, very recently, as in the last week or so. That's interesting. Gallic infantry. On some of the units, light infantry is in white, and in some of them it's in black. And I don't know what that means. Might mean nothing. I don't know. We're real close to being done with this guy. This was the last counter sheet. To get done clipping and sorting, I gotta actually do the final organization yet. So my goal, I realize we have not gotten to the week's topic yet, but you know it's okay. So I'll give you a seed to think about though. The idea was actually sparked by a comment that Half-Ass Gaming made on one of the videos about a rule book that, you know, of a relatively recent release that was in black and white. So, and I know we've talked about outdated game systems in the context of game systems that have been around since like the mid to early 70s. What we haven't talked about are game systems that are, or releases at least, that are relatively recent, but that nevertheless feel dated. And I'd like to kind of explore that and see what people think makes them feel dated, whether it's a black and white rule book or whether it's okay, or whether it's a particular, you know, approach to the game, or whether it's an I go you go, you know, structure or what. So Dallas, there's the Dallas and Tempe events have always been separate. Okay, I do know that there was some hotel fuckery that John had to deal with that resulted in the Dallas event getting not canceled, but last I heard John was still working on it. I'll have to check to see what we're talking about for Tempe right now. So I'd love to go to Tempe. It's as we've discussed before, it's an expensive trip for me. That said, I think I'm in a place now where I could go, but maybe not quite this year. So we'll see what happens. Now, if somebody's looking for a roommate for Tempe and doesn't mind a roommate who snores and farts a lot, but will nevertheless not fucking welch on you in the middle of the event and leaving you on the hook for the bill, then let me know. So, because that does change the calculus significantly. Stigler says pink and blue counters, like the old Avalon Hill counters. I can't argue with that at all. Well, I imagine you can't really eat that buffet morning, noon, and night either, you know. I'm perfectly happy with like a business hotel breakfast, which is what the Winterfest Best Western has. It's, you know, it's same kind of thing you'd find where it's, you know, quickie stuff that was reheated, but it's not like sandwiches out of a refrigerator either. So it's like actual food. So. Now, there are some folks that do the lodge thing at WBC, and I do not have a line on that, so that might change the calculus for that as well. So Thomas Bandy, let me answer that question, and then I'll get back to our immediate gaming plans, which I kind of lost track of. So Pacific War is supposed to start charging on the 6th, which would be what, Thursday? Being superseded by Empire of the Sun. I mean, I think the two games are different enough that I think Empire of the Sun superseding Pacific War is a bit of a silly statement. Empire of the Sun is a one-map strategic picture of the entire war in the Pacific. There are shorter scenarios, but you're basically playing out either the entire war or a huge chunk of the entire Pacific War. Pacific War is not that kind of game. It is a two-map monster that is a set of operational scenarios that are the kind of the core of the game, and then, or operational campaigns, I think is what Mark calls them. And then there is a strategic scenario or strategic campaign, which is the entire the entire Pacific War. You know, by Mark's own admission, in Pacific War, in the old one, the game is designed around the operational scenarios and not about the big strategic play the whole war out and it'll take 200 or 300 hours type of thing. There's a ton of additional rules overhead to play out that strategic scenario. So the two games are really about different things, right? Empire of the Sun is about the whole war in the Pacific that you can play out in 4 to 7 hours or so. And Pacific War is about any of a number of operational situations in the Pacific War. So now that said, there is some shared DNA there, right? Like the way the intelligence works and stuff like that. There's some obvious, I mean, you would think there would be, they're by the same designer. There's some obvious shared DNA things, but while it certainly would be valid for somebody to come along and say, boy, I greatly prefer Empire of the Sun because it's, you know, you can play it in one sitting or whatever, or I really like CDGs or whatever reason they have over Pacific War, that's completely valid, but in no general sense does it replace or make obsolete Pacific War. They are different kinds of games. I don't want to say they're apples to apples, maybe, but they're like Honeycrisp to apples to Granny Smith apples, you know. The new Pacific War does have mounted maps, yes. Stigler says Pacific War has nothing in common with Empire of the Sun. I don't think that's true, but the amount of overlap there is much less than some people might assume based on the fact that the same person designed both games. There is some amount of overlap, but not very much. So there's 3 maps in Pacific in the new GMT thing. There's the 2 big mounted maps, and then there's a 3rd unmounted map that is like a particular frame that you can use to play out most of the scenarios. So you get kind of best of both worlds. Let's hope we put it in we can get it all back in the box. That'd be great. Daniel Bugger says some old games that use push CRTs but don't really model attrition or morale. Blue and Gray. I mean, the Library of Napoleonic Battles, you know, based on the venerable Napoleon's Last Battles quad, that uses a push-pull CRT as well. And it's not quite bloodless, but I mean there's a lot of push-pull. There's some other ways to do damage in that system. So I have not felt like that system is dated, but I also feel like there probably are examples of many other game systems that share features with it that do feel dated. I think in that particular case, it's kind of a timeless game that holds up really, really well. So, anyway, so I'm not quite sure. We're going to figure it out no later than Wednesday, I guess, what we're doing for the next couple of weeks on the other non-OCS game night. But after that, whenever it comes out, and I'm kind of figuring second week of February, that's a complete guess. I mean, this is not, again, not inside information. Nobody from GMT has called me and told me this. I'm kind of figuring second, third week of February, we'll start looking at setting up Pacific War. I am very much looking forward, Joe Wood, thanks for stopping by. Very much looking forward to the new edition of Barbarossa Army Group Center. I mean, it's basically the same game, but there are some I think, improvements to it. One of the improvements is there's no step loss markers anymore. You actually have 3-step units, and you flip to the second step, and if you take a third step, you swap the counter out with a lower strength cadre, or whatever we're calling it. Somebody asked if the 3-column format feels old-fashioned. And I don't think so, but I also, you know, do have sort of a fuzzy, warm, fuzzy, nostalgic feeling for SPI, not to the same extent that some people do, but I still get the warm fuzzies about SPI stuff too. And that was their signature layout. So that's a thing. SPI, Stigler says SPI isn't dated because some of their games still hold up against modern fare, and I completely agree with that. A lot of their games don't, but there's some games that do. I mean, honestly, a lot of Avalon Hill games don't stand up to more modern treatments of those topics either. So now, if you start looking at like the real early, like 1973 SPI games, then you'll certainly feel like the graphics are pretty primitive, right? Where you literally you got like 2-color maps and stuff like that. That's true of early Avalon Hill stuff too, though. With as was mentioned, the pink and blue counters, for example. So Vince Reed mentions the case system. So that was something that a case that was made actually on Twitter a couple of weeks ago by Mr. Ryan Howman, Charles S. Roberts Awards winning Ryan Howman. So we had him on the show with Dan to talk specifically about that, and he was actually very reasonable about it. Once we cornered him, but I mean, I think that there are some new games that don't need the case system, and for which the case system would probably kind of be in the way. The example that was put forth for this would be Shores of Tripoli. The Shores of Tripoli, is that a complicated enough game that it really needs the case system? I don't think it is. So, now, John, I played a lot more Avalon Hill games back in the day, and the day for me is the 80s, right? But I nevertheless started with SPI, and always had, you know, fondness for SPI. Avalon Hill Stalingrad, it is not a great game. I mean, bluntly, a lot of those games are not very good games. I mean, not even judged by modern standards, but or judged against modern designs, but a lot of those mid 60s, or really all the 60s Avalon Hill games do not hold up. I think Bulge 65 kind of does, and I think Africa Corps falls in there too. I think that was released in the 60s. That probably holds up, maybe to a lesser extent Anzio, but games like Chancellorsville or Stalingrad, which is of course not about Stalingrad, I don't think those are worth anybody's time. But in part, that's because Avalon Hill themselves did a game later on, which of course would be Russian campaign, that vastly surpassed Stalingrad, both in terms of how good it is and in terms of popularity. Avalon Hill Starship Troopers does feel old. I mean, look at the cover art on that thing. It's like 50s cover art. Marty, I haven't done a thorough analysis of the Longest Day Order Battle, and I'm not going to, but I would imagine that, I mean, I don't feel like that whole... I know that some folks remember it very fondly. I don't think that Longest Day is worth anybody's time anymore either. Jeff Anderson says a strategic game like GMT's 30 Years War that has no reaction, retreat, or intercept for the non-phasing player. I have never played that. It's kind of been on my list of things that would be nice to have for a while, but it was never been a priority. I didn't realize that, and that is an unfortunate design decision, I think. And interestingly, I'd be curious to see the date on that as compared to the Napoleonic Wars, the Mark McLaughlin Napoleonic Wars, because that has retreat and that has like non-phasing reaction. But so does War and Peace, right? Which they both have the same designer, Mark McLaughlin. So that concept definitely predates that 30 Years War by quite a bit. I only saw the first Starship Troopers movie, and it is an interesting movie, but it's not really an adaptation of the book. Let's put it that way. I mean, Paul Verhoeven admitted that he had not read the book. So... Avalon Hill D-Day is... So there's a couple different versions of Avalon Hill D-Day. There's a later one that came out in the 80s or 90s, and that one might actually be okay. But the really old Avalon Hill D-Day, I've looked at that. That's really primitive. It's right in line with SPI's Normandy, and I'm not sure that's worthwhile anymore either. These might be super unpopular opinions, but... John Madison mentions, Scott Bell says 50-year-old video games. We're actually at the point where there are 50-year-old video games, though. So, John Madison says that Rise and Fall of the Third Reich has a staying power and that it's been constantly updated and morphed. So, yeah, I think that's actually a game that's still worth playing, actually. That's an Avalon Hill thing that I think holds up extremely well. And I think the fact that the design is functionally still around now with a lot of additional chrome in various incarnations is a testament to the fact that it does, in fact, hold up quite well now. Now, the super hardcore Third Reich people are, of course, have moved to World at War, or maybe the War, or probably none of them went to the Avalanche Press Bucket of Dice versions, but because those went over like the proverbial Led Zeppelin. Starship Troopers totally is a political screed. I mean, if we're talking about the are we talking about the book or the movie? Because they both are, but they're arguing different politics, which is the thing I think that makes the film adaptation fairly interesting. Now, if you like view the movie in the context of it's kind of this diegetic in-universe propaganda film, then I think the movie makes a lot of sense and is actually quite clever in a lot of ways. But as a adaptation of the book, which is a book I liked, right, but it's an interesting book, right? It's like Starship Troopers, and you know the forerunner of the military sci-fi genre, and yet there's very little action in it, right? It's mostly people sitting in classrooms being talked at. So, all right, let me grab these because we are about to start packing this stuff away in the trays, that is. So, Scott Bell mentions War at Sea and Victory in the Pacific. I agree with that. I think Victory in the Pacific holds up better, but that is more due to the fact that that system is more interesting in the Pacific than it is based on the fact that the system is weak in the Atlantic or something like that. Doesn't make sense. The naval war in the Pacific is more interesting than the naval war in the Atlantic. Let me put it that way. I think everybody would pretty much agree with me on that. So I don't really want to get into this because I've always operated under the assumption that none of you fine folks are here to listen to my politics. I don't consider Heinlein a fascist, but Heinlein's political views were pretty complicated, right? I mean, he was also, if you take what he wrote in his fiction as what Heinlein thought was the right thing, then there's a lot of really wacky stuff in there, including the giant incest plotline in the Lazarus Long stuff. So it's my inclination to not necessarily assume that, but Heinlein also wrote Starship Troopers literally in response to some political event or article or something like that, where he got super pissed off about it and then wrote this book and then sent it off to the publisher of his juveniles, and they got it and said, "What the fuck is this?" And they sent it back, and that was the end of him with the juveniles. So, I mean, Heinlein would have probably called himself a libertarian, but that word had a pretty different meaning, contextual meaning now than it did at the time. And I do think it is a legitimate reading of Starship Troopers to say that Starship Troopers paints a relatively rosy picture of some version of fascism. I don't think that's entirely accurate, but it's a fair reading of that book. It's very easy to read that book and come away with that. But we have leaders. But that's not also to say that that is necessarily one-for-one map of Heinlein's actual politics, which were all over the place. So, all right, Sink the Bismarck. Avalon Hill's Bismarck would be an interesting thing to bring back, actually, I think. That's at least that's an interesting-looking game. I've never actually played it. Mo from Mo's Game Table is here. Well, he had a pretty, if you read the letters, Heinlein had a really, really difficult relationship with whoever the publisher of the juveniles was. They were constantly giving it, forcing him to make changes that he didn't want to make and stuff like that. So that was a difficult relationship regardless of what the situation was at that exact moment. Alright, we're still trying to figure this out. GDW's Blue Max, I've been talking to a couple people that have played that relatively Drug, I didn't say it was an accurate reading. I said it's possible to read that. I think it's easy to do that. Let me put it that way. Is that a bit of a superficial reading? Yes, it is. To be clear. Alright, we have a huge number of barbarian infantry here, which are found nowhere else in this particular set. Wings of the Peterburgs mentions Wings of the Motherland. And that's that's a considerably more interesting looking game than I thought it was when I first heard about it. As to how dated it looks, I have not given it a close examination, so I can't really give a comment on that. Avalon Hills Jutland is another very interesting property in that it's kind of like a cross between a miniatures game and a tabletop war game, or maybe it's not even that much of a hybrid. Maybe it's just more of a miniatures game. That's possible. GT Pony Rider says, is the new edition of Pacific War going to get played more than the old because there's no shortage of unpunched and unplayed copies? That's absolutely true. I do think that there are physical reasons why, to some extent, I think there are physical reasons why that can be the case, because the old, honestly, absolutely any Victory Games title, maybe not absolutely any, but a great majority of Victory Games titles that have half-inch counters, those counters are really hard to deal with nowadays. We're all older, and that's part of the reason, but that's not the entire reason either. Those counters for here's Numidian Light Cavalry. Those counters for Hell's Highway are a complete shambles. So, well, several people have mentioned this, so I'll mention it again for anybody that's watching on the television or something and can't see the chat. Sacred Oil is apparently, folks in the chat are reporting that Sacred Oil is still listed as being available from Thin Red Line Games. If you're interested in it, push the button. It's close to $200 US, but if you're interested, push the button because it will be out of print soonish, and at that point it will go for twice that. So, if findable at all. I had Starship Troopers, the board game, the Avalon Hill game back in the day, and it was a better game than Star Soldier, I think, but that's about as far as I'll go with it. I didn't find that it was particularly interesting, and I did no more than mess with it very superficially. Boy, that's good. That's just good. So if you're into the World War I, isn't there a Wings of War or whatever it's called thing with World War I aircraft? I think they are. So yeah, there is an alternate counter set for Hell's Highway specifically that you can buy. However, you might be better off just waiting for the new version of it from New England Simulations, which I have no information on when that will be out, but it's not like they're building it from scratch, right? It's a time-tested design. It keeps getting played. It's interesting that I'd love to actually break this down, but it's very difficult to put this together. to take a look at, say, SPI, Victory Games, and Avalon Hill Games, and to come up with, now, you know, I'd come up with a list, and you'd come up with a list, and it might be two completely different lists, but what percentage of games from each of those three publishers hold up best? Okay, so Avalon Hill and SPI probably had a comparable amount of output. Avalon Hill had fewer games per year, but it was around for a lot longer than SPI. So I'd say, you know, roughly they each did a couple of hundred games, maybe several hundred games. I don't know what the exact number is without looking it up. Victory Games probably did 100 things, some of which is RPG stuff and some of which is stuff like the Dr. Ruth's Game of Good Sex. But I would venture to guess that of the three brands, the brand with the highest percentage of titles that hold up very well today is Victory Games. Now, as we all know, Victory Games was kind of founded to kind of carry on the SPI tradition. To what extent Mark would agree with that, I'm not sure, but that's how I'm phrasing it today. Wings of Glory is, I think, the thing I'm thinking of. And it looks nice. I'll have to tell you that. So I guess the next thing from Thin Red Line might be another printing of Deadly Northern Lights, but they have said that there's not going to be another printing of Under an Iron Sky. So did anything come in this week? Yes. Unboxing's already up. Red Flag Over Paris came in this week, so that's cool. War Without Garlands came in this week. I honestly prefer to buy this kind of stuff in ebook format, but in this case, I think I couldn't get the ebook for as cheap as I could get the paperback. And I didn't expect the book to be huge, but good reputation. I got a David Lance Belarus book coming that I need to read. Preparation for Winterfest. If you're looking for dice towers, check eBay. This is walnut. It's very well made, although I think it could have used a slightly more thorough sanding. And it is a very nice, quite heavy walnut dice tower. This costs $26 plus shipping on eBay. There's a fellow here in Ohio who's making them and selling them. I think I'm going to give it a very light sanding on my end and possibly put felt in the bottom, but otherwise it is very nice. I am working on a new dice tower of my design for Winterfest. So, and then I got this dice tower, also from eBay. This was $26. It's not nearly as well made, but it is made of aromatic cedar, and it is lined with felt, and in the tower as well. So it's quite nice. So I've now got 4 dice towers, and I'm not sure why. So there's all that. So that was all, you know, post-Christmas stuff. So we're gonna have to, yeah. I'll tell you, if you look for dice towers on eBay and Etsy, there's so many different folks making them that you'll probably find what you're looking for. If not, make it yourself. I literally made my first 3 or 4 dice towers out of cardboard. Go to an art store and buy like the thickest cardboard you can get, and use that. And it will wear, and then you put it together and you line it or whatever and you paint it, and it'll feel like wood. Unless you sit on it, it'll act just like wood. So there's no reason really you have to use wood, let alone if you've got a 3D printer or one of those machines that cuts out the MDC board or whatever it is. So Mo says next from Thin Red Line is the next C3 game. That's that Dogs of War series. To finish out that series. Wasn't there going to be like 5 games in that series? I thought there's only 2 already. I might be wrong about that. So the Deadly Northern Lights does look pretty cool to me. Levin 1976 asks, should ASL be upgraded? It's a great gaming system, but the counters and the maps look super dated. I don't really feel that the maps are particularly dated, but I will absolutely cop to the counters looking pretty dated. I think that if that game system were, and I'm proposing no rules changes in this statement, okay? You do exactly the same game. You increase the infantry counters to 5/8. You scale the maps up a little bit. You increase the vehicle counters to, say, 7/8 or 1 inch or whatever. And just make everything bigger, scale it up, use more color on the counters. That is well within our capabilities nowadays. That would require a complete graphical redesign of the counters, especially of the vehicles. I think you could improve the game in terms of attractiveness, aesthetic appeal, and I think you could improve the game's playability by implementing graphic tools that they didn't necessarily have available to them at the economy of scale that we have nowadays back in the late 80s when they were working on that in the first place. I think that's just, I mean, MMP is a very sort of hidebound bunch. Let's be honest. They're not going to change that. Yes, they've kind of made slight improvements with bigger print and stuff like that. I don't think they're willing to upset the ASL apple cart. Let me put it that way. They've done very innovative stuff in some other areas, but I don't think they're really doing that with ASL. But at the same time, I don't want to turn it into Conflict of Heroes either, right? So it is not. So I have, we live in a small house, and I have very few power tools. I did a all-wood dice tower out of hobby plywood, and it was, it wasn't one that I stained. It was one that I painted at the end. And I have one of those really small, cheap Harbor Freight belt sanders. Between a handsaw and sandpaper and that belt sander, I built a fabulous dice tower. So you don't need a bunch of fancy tools. And honestly, I could have gone without the belt sander. It would have just taken me longer with the sandpaper. The dice towers at Origins are super expensive. I've looked at dice towers on Etsy too, and frankly, I found nicer ones that I liked more on eBay. That were, I don't like fancy. For example, I don't like the fancy color dice. I like color dice, right? Red dice or white dice or black or whatever. I don't like the fancy swirly dice. For RPG stuff, it's a little different. I'll do the fancier dice sometimes, but not like the super fancy dice that cost like $80 for D20. Because screw that. I could buy Wargames with that money. I am super duper looking forward to the Third World War series. Also found, by the way, a truck. This is out of Case Blue. I know that that's a Case Blue truck. So, I did not get in on the Thin Red Line C3 series. I do know that it's not the same system or anything like that, but it's kind of trying to fit into the same space as the old Central Front series. But it's also got cards and a bunch of other stuff that Central Front didn't have, so. Wormwood stuff is really nice, but it's really, really expensive. So, tweezers. This is not in the travel kit. I got tweezers, 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 and there's these tweezers here too. So I'm all set on tweezers. Honestly, these ones that I bought from the Gamers years ago are still some of the best tweezers that I have. And then I have those bent tweezers that some of you might have seen. I got these rubber tip tweezers from Amazon. And I'm not super crazy about them. I kind of wanted to try them. None of these were expensive, right? I also got these super duper huge tweezers that you can use for like flipping shrimp on the Barbie. And these are just too big to be practical. Geek Chic is that's different though. Those are like huge pieces of furniture. And if you bought like a huge piece of furniture that big from somebody else, it would have been the same amount of money. They were the folks that were they started making the boutique game tables. They were, I think, pricier than what you see now. And some of their game tables were real goofy too, but yeah, nowadays board game tables, and there's a couple other companies doing tables. And they are expensive, but they're not necessarily more expensive than to have like actual Amish craftsmen make you a dining room table right out of like real hardwood. It's not a real war game if you don't have to use tweezers with it, the way I see it. They were very expensive, and they did go out of business. So, you got the Carl Malden taking off your glasses move. I'll have to work on that. I don't know if they went bankrupt or not, but they went away one way or the other. I wasn't paying that much attention. I'm not disputing anything that has been said here because I have no information about any of it. So, I like my games to look nice. You know, you can spend as much, like any hobby, right? Say your hobby's fishing, right? You can go to Walmart, buy a fishing rod, buy some lures, and fish for 20 years, and you spent like $150, right? I could buy Third Winter and just play that, right? You know, that's not I like to play different stuff, so that turns out not to be the kind of gamer I am, but hobbies cost as much or as little as you want them to, right? There's people that play ASL that don't own any ASL stuff. They maybe buy the rule book, but otherwise they play with other people's pieces all the time. Why buy it all yourself? So, Jim Ozarski says he's going to use tweezers for his miniatures in Tabletop Simulator. That's what you have to do. Does Tabletop Simulator have tweezers? If not, I'm not using it. I'm boycotting Tabletop Simulator until it has tweezers. I mean, I don't insist on a dice tower, but it is nice to have a dice tower so that the dice aren't rolling all over your map, because that's irritating. Marty says that some Geek Chic customers bought their own tables at the bankruptcy auction. That's something else, actually. Honestly, so I've been thinking about this, actually. Let's say I had, like, the dream room to play Wargames in. I would be perfectly happy with folding tables, right? Go to Costco and buy like 6 folding tables. Completely happy with that. I mean, the fancy board game table is nice because you can leave something set up. But if you bump it, is it going to mess it up? I think it might. I don't know. So, Marty says Geek Chic was even on Shark Tank. Well, that's because Shark Tank is a fantasy show. I mean, we always, back in the day, we just used the box top, right? I mean, if this isn't, you don't have to have a fancy dice tower. But like I said, I paid $26 for walnut. And they had an oak one that was like $19. And it took like 2 days. I mean, I'm in Ohio too. It took like 2 days to get here. So, I'm not 19 anymore. I don't have to use the box top. I like to have a nice dice tower. I like my counters to look nice. I like my maps to look nice. I like everything to be under plexi, all nice. So, I don't know that I'd go with a ping pong table either. I like the modularity of the folding tables. And yes, everybody please give the video a thumbs up. Please do subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. If you'd like to help support the channel, there will be a segment in the instructional video thanking patrons. Please do check out the links in the video description to the Patreon, the merch store, and the Ko-Fi. Ko-Fi is, if you want to help out, but you don't necessarily want to like sign up to throw in $1 a month or something like that. You could just, you know, buy me the cup of coffee or scotch, as it were. Although $5 doesn't go very far with this stuff. So there's that. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it, right? You can get poster frames and just use those. And in fact, if you get like those poster sleeves that look like giant card sleeves, you could actually like sleeve all of your maps and just cape them all in like a big stack. That might be interesting. I wouldn't actually do that. I do sort of see the appeal in storing maps flat, but I foresee no scenario in which I will have the space to do that. I'm like I said, I'm perfectly happy. I do prefer the old particle board folding tables to the plastic ones because they weigh more and they're harder to jostle, but they also suck. So they're super heavy, they're hard to move around. They actually wear fairly poorly. Oh God, laminated maps. Oh, I hate laminated. I'll be honest, I hate laminated maps. You know, you do what you want to do to protect your maps. I'm not going to say it doesn't make sense to laminate your maps. I'm going to say I don't like laminated maps. I'm a fan of Plexi. I'm happy to. There's people that use Plexi despite having laminated maps. And we're seeing this because of the way we got the map set up in War in the Desert. We've got part of the map under Plexi and part of the map which is laminated. That part of the map pooches a lot and a lot of stacks, and of course it's Europa, so you know we got stacks. Oh, do we got stacks? I knock over a lot of stacks just because of that little bit of pooch, that little 1/16 of an inch pooch that map has, because it's not under Plexi. So I'm not a fan of not having maps under Plexi. In a game with low stacking or no stacking, you know, would that be as big of an issue? It would not be, frankly. So the top loaders are kind of what I was talking about, where they're really kind of those big sleeves. The only problem with those is they tend to warp. Unless they're stored flat, they'll tend to bend, and then you got to tape them down anyway, and at that point, why not just use Plexi? Lamination does reflect light roughly as badly as Plexi does. Yeah, it does. Hopshed NZ, thanks for stopping by. The other thing is that sometimes lamination will go bad, right? If it's something, especially if it's not properly laminated, but maybe even just laminated in the wrong way. Sometimes the lamination will separate and take the paper with it, and that's bad news. So, John Madison says matte lamination. I haven't seen that. You can allegedly get anti-glare Plexi as well, but that really is overrated. Scott Bell wants to fund a Wargamers retirement home. If I win the $1 billion lottery, I will do that for you guys. How about that? Ooh, nice. Basement wargaming. I'm a fan of using the basement for that, but you do need to make sure the basement's super duper dry, and even if it's super duper dry, I'd probably still put a dehumidifier and a backup sump pump down there. How to ruin your war games. We could do that. I'm not... So some people like to do the spray varnish on their counters too, and I've never done that. I've never tried doing that. So I'm not sure how well that would work. Now, Levin 1976 says somebody played DAC, mounted it on a wall of steel using magnetic counters. So I've never used the magnets, okay? So the one big... So there's some concerns with that. One is finding enough of the counter magnets to use in a big game. That's actually a problem nowadays. Because both manufacturers of those, I think, are not available anymore. Now, you could use 3D print your own. Yeah, I think you could. And buy your own little neodymium tiny magnets. And yeah, you could. But you're going to spend hundreds of dollars on that project, okay? So you have there's two different kinds of counter magnets that I've seen. One of which you kind of slid the counter in from the side, and it would kind of wrap around the counter. Those are the old shield laminations magnets. And then there's those newer ones that kind of clamp on the counter from the side, and you can flip the counter. But those look to me like they're going to damage counters. And the old shield laminations ones didn't work with double-sided counters, or you had to like extract it from the thing, which might damage it, and turn it upside down and slide it back in. And then you got to have this giant piece of sheet steel on your wall behind the map. And for a big game, sounds like a pain. Now, what we did back in the day to play War in Europe was we put it on a wall using like that plastic tack artist putty or whatever it's called. That like adhesive blue tack, I think it was called. And then we used blue tack to keep the counters on the map as well. It did not work particularly well. So I think the vertical wargaming thing is a cool idea. I don't think it works particularly with super big games. It becomes as big a project as playing the game. And this, of course, is, you know, do you have 2 or 3 or 5,000 counter magnets? I'm guessing you don't. So in this case, I will go with Stigler on this and say I'd rather just get to the game and find somebody with a basement or an attic or a shed or garage or whatever it is that's got 2.5 by 6 foot folding tables. The vast majority of even large war games will fit on 2.5 by 6 foot folding tables. Are there some that won't? Yes, there are. There's quite a few that won't, but almost any. I mean, the number of games that won't fit on that size table is probably a few dozen. Almost everything else will. Well, if he's from Levin's 1976, this is assuming he's from New Zealand. I don't recall that being confirmed. Now, nowadays you can get that magnetic strip, which does come in 1/2 inch, and that's the official World at War way of doing it. World at War, however, has single-sided counters, so most war games now don't have single-sided counters. So that's actually a problem. It Never Snows is pretty friggin' long, though. And Stigler mentions you do not have to worry about physical footprint if you are playing on Vassal. That is absolutely true. That is actually a point I'm going to make that the script says I'm going to make in the OCS videos. Like, hey, these games are all big, but there's always Vassal if you don't happen to have a giant basement. You put, set up Case Blue. That's part of the problem with that blue tack is if you keep handling it and it absorbs the grease from your fingers and eventually puts grease spots on all your counters. It's gross. So Zed did they say Zed in the UK too? I thought so. I will not consider Tabletop Simulator until it has tweezers. I know it has rounded counters. I've seen that too with the pins. We never did that, but I've seen copies of games that have been mutilated in that manner. So no thanks. I mean, I think that we do have, to get back sort of to the topic here, I think that we do have some games that are consciously retro in their presentation on purpose. I think Thin Red Line is like that. I think, at least the counters are. I think New England Simulations is like that. And yet I don't feel like their games feel to me, they don't feel particularly dated, but bluntly, my tastes are dated, and I'm completely okay with that. completely okay with whatever the youngsters. We were watching, what were we watching? The Don't Look Up on Netflix, which is interesting, okay? So I like go over to my wife. I think that's Ariana Grande. She's like, yes? Did you not know that? I'm like, no. She's like, she's very talented. I'm like, I'm not saying she's not talented. I'm saying I'm old and haven't. I mean, I've heard the name. I've never seen her on camera before. I have no idea. So, you know, I have old-fashioned tastes, and I'm pretty comfortable with that. You know, even when I was a teenager, I had old-fashioned taste in music. I was listening to mostly my. I don't know about to say my dad's music, but the music of my dad's generation. My parents were not into the Doors, which I got super into as a teenager. Now, I do have great sympathy for what Catacycsm now is saying here. He spends 40 plus hours a week staring at a computer screen and doesn't feel like doing that for his hobby as well. I agree with that. I will choose to play. If it's this week we're going to play Third Winter. Are we going to play on Vassal or are we going to play in person? Well, if we can play in person, I'd rather play in person. Not close. It wasn't that the Chris Evans cameo. It was a cameo, but it wasn't that subtle. So I've been clipping counters since the early 90s, and I was introduced to the idea in the early 90s. And I've been clipping I've clipped everything since. The game does not feel ready to play to me unless the corners are clipped. I even prefer that the corners be rounded in Vassal. But it's less important because I'm not going to drop them because they're not in Vassal, right? So yeah, I've got the getting back to I've got 28 episodes planned on this OCS thing. We'll see how that actually works out. I wanted to shoot for 10 minutes. Let's hope I get something done here too. Let's be honest. John Longshore asks about MMP's Devil's Cauldron. Yeah, it's awesome actually. And in fact, even if you don't have War Eagle's Dare, I'm still going to recommend getting the reprint, which MMP does say they're still going to do. It's available for pre-order now. I'd still recommend the reprint because it's a wonderful package. It's got tons of scenarios, just tons of content in there. So the first episode was going to be like the new introduction to OCS, and I wanted it to be 10 minutes or less. So if you don't know, average spoken speech is like 125 to 150 words per minute, according to Google. Okay, so based on that assumption, I'm going to get about 20 minutes or 22 minutes of video out of this. And this assuming, not with the intro and the outro and all that stuff. So, I don't know if there's an easy way to do the corners rounded in Vassal. I didn't find one unless you're making them from scratch, and then maybe it works. Then maybe it's efficient. But if you're not, it's a pain in the ass. Ed Sheeran was in Game of Thrones, and I think he was credited. I believe it was not just it was kind of a cameo, but they're sitting around a fire and there's Ed Sheeran and they're singing a song. I don't care for him, anything that I've heard of his, but that doesn't mean he's terrible. That just means I'm old. Yeah, so assuming we get this OCS thing done, right? And I should be focusing pretty tightly on OCS the next couple of months, which is why I feel like now is a good time to make progress on this. I haven't done the actual math to say what that turns out to be. Let's run that. So episode 1 script is 2,800 words. So if we say 2,800 words is the average and we times that by 28, then that's 80,000 words. That's a novel length of stuff. Some of it, like I said, some of it can be mass-produced, so we'll see what happens. Yes, Devil's Cauldron is the grand tactical series. Adam Starkweather is now talking about an advanced CSS, an A CSS, starting a new series, so we'll see what that turns into as well. So this was back when Game of Thrones was still good. Yes, the guy that played the Blackfish, Brendan Tully, was in 13th Warrior. Clive. I'm blanking on the name now, but I've got all of my GTS stuff punched and ready to go. All 4 games that I have. I don't have No Question of Surrender, but that's because I'm not super into the topic. So. Now, see, Vassal could really use a dice tower because its die roller sucks. So, The 13th Warrior is a deeply, deeply flawed movie that was destroyed in the editing room. But I love it nonetheless. It's also got a wonderful soundtrack, a wonderful Jerry Goldsmith soundtrack that was so good that they repurposed one of the tracks for the Kingdom of Heaven, and it was super out of place and super obvious. Terrible idea. You could just tell watching the film that there was like a whole intro thing where he gets cast out of Baghdad that they filmed and just got cut. So, and a lot of the kind of the pacing is very choppy, and that's editing. That's an editing problem too. There was a power struggle between John McTiernan, who directed it, and Michael Crichton, who wrote it, and Crichton won. And it probably broke the movie. If Marty says The Expanse is better than Game of Thrones, and, well, 2 episodes from the end of it, yeah, way better. There's no doubt about that. Game of Thrones was really good when it was on, but I'm never going to rewatch it because I find it, I don't want to say pessimistic, but it's like it's got this sort of relentlessly grimdark, dehumanizing tone that I just don't really want to deal with a second time. And I'm much in love with The Expanse at this point. There's, I think, only 2 episodes left. It's like, wow, it's going to be hard to wrap this up in 2 episodes. So I don't know if its final season will feel rushed or not, but I do know how the book ends, and I expect it's going to be better than Game of Thrones. Let me put it that way. So I was thinking about this, and I haven't put this on social media. Have you ever like had a show where you're like afraid the new episode's out and you're afraid to watch it because you feel like it can't possibly do anything but let you down because all of the previous stuff was that friggin' good. That's how I feel about The Expanse. It's that friggin' good. It started out, you know, finding its feet and all that. It was still pretty good season 1, season 2. But boy, since it left sci-fi, it's just gotten better and better and better with everything that they're doing. I see why they're closing it down now, because that's kind of where the books close this particular thread down. But the little birds are singing that another reason why they're shutting it down now is because of the terms of their contract to broadcast the show, but that they retain the option to do other things in the universe, like a miniseries or a movie or something like that. So I think we are going to see more of The Expanse from Amazon. And frankly, I think in 30 years, I think we're still going to be talking about that show. Because it's that friggin' good. So I've read the first 6 novels. Okay, so I don't think I'm spoiling anything by telling you this, but put your fingers in your ears if you don't want to hear this. So there's like one big sort of ongoing interlinking story thing that happens in the first 6 books, and then there's a time gap, and then there's another sort of follow-on story that happens in the last 3 books. The show is going to stop when the time gap happens, okay? And I've read the books up to that point, and they're leaning, I mean, the signs are there that we're going to close season 6 in a similar way to the book, and that's all I'll say. The Last Duel, I kind of like to see that, just because it's an interesting topic and it looks neat and all that. Babylon 5 is a tragically underappreciated property nowadays, but that's because Warner Brothers had no idea what to do with it. It's been hard to get, hard to watch until it showed up on HBO Now just a few months ago. People are starting to talk about Babylon 5 again. Babylon 5 was awesome. None of this ongoing arc-based television would even be happening now if it wasn't for Babylon 5. It is possible for a movie to be super duper depressing and super duper good, and I'm super duper not going to watch it again. An example: Schindler's List, wonderful movie. Boy, am I not going to sit through it again. I am not going to be in an emotional space to take that again anytime soon. Let me put it that way. Tim Zale says that Farscape was better than The Expanse. You are totally wrong, sir. When Farscape was on, Farscape was really great. But a lot of the time, Farscape was not on and was filling episodes up with filler. When they were done, their main storyline with Scorpius and all that stuff was all really good. But yeah, consistently not remotely close to what The Expanse is. John Madison says Battle of the Planets is better than Farscape. I remember Battle of the Planets. I wish I could find that, actually. I'd love to watch that again. Although I'm sure it would be terrible now. But I remember that. I would love to see that. That and Star Blazers. But you could go watch Star Blazers on Amazon. So I love The 13th Warrior, but it's not my favorite movie of all time. But it's on my top, say, 10 movie soundtracks of all time. As Marty points out, there is talk of a reboot for Babylon 5. J. Michael Straczynski is working on it. We'll see what that turns into. There is a development hell phenomenon that happens, and it could be that Warner Brothers will lose their nerve and chicken out, and we won't see it. But we'll see it. Space Above and Beyond was a thing that had a lot of potential, and they canceled it too soon, and it never fulfilled its potential. It was not that good. I didn't think. I don't think it holds up very well. Let me put it that way. Now, had it gotten a 5th season, then maybe. That's possible. It had tons of potential. I got used to the puppets, to be honest. The puppets were really well done. I got used to the puppets. I'll be honest, a lot of people, really like that not Babylon 5, I wish. The Battlestar Galactica reboot, the sci-fi one. And I thought the first season was really good. The miniseries was decent. The first season was really good. The second season was pretty good. It was downhill from there. The third season was less good, the fourth season was bad, and the fifth season was worse. And there is a literal, if you haven't seen the show, by all means watch it. There is a literal moment in which you can see the shark jumping over the newly revealed Cylon characters. So it was absolutely immersion-breaking, show-breaking moment. The show was absolutely wrecked. And that was in season 4. There have been a bunch of attempts to bring back either the Outer Limits or the Twilight Zone, none of which have held up very long. I'm finished with The Wheel of Time. I liked it. It's got some adaptation problems and it's got some structural problems, but on the whole, I think it was watchable. I thought it looked good. It's well acted. It's not problem free. And I think some of the changes that they made, some of them are well motivated and some of them were kind of senseless. And there's like weird omissions, but some of that is due to production issues that they had due to a COVID shutdown in the middle of filming their first season too. So I'm willing to cut them some slack on that. And even so, I thought it was generally, I thought they did more right than wrong, unlike Foundation, which was a complete train wreck, complete derailment of that show. The first three episodes were good. After that, it was like, it went everywhere and nowhere. It was just dreadful. Despite a good cast that's really trying hard to work with garbage material. Original Star Trek is dated. It's hard, I'll be honest, you can watch it on Netflix. It's a little hard to watch. I mean, and I grew up on that stuff. There's certain episodes that I can still watch, but some of like the filler episodes are like, this is not that good. Doesn't hold up very well. But I mean, we've got 70 years of whatever it is, not 70, but it's a lot of years of additional sci-fi television that have built on the legacy, a lot of which has been built on the legacy of Star Trek. So it's not fair to say, oh, it's crap now. I don't even know what Moffat Field has just said. I'm not sure what that even means. Yeah, Next Gen is a... So if you like the story structure from original series, but can't deal with the 60s acting or the 60s special effects, then Next Gen is going to feel fine for you. And I think a lot of Next Gen holds up pretty well. So, Land of the Lost. I vaguely remember that. That was not something I liked as a kid. That's not vaguely. I clearly remember it, but I didn't really care for it as a kid. Well, Joe, I do watch these things. First of all, welcome to the stream. But I do watch these things, and we do have a certain amount, as you may have noticed, there's a certain amount of topic drift that occurs in these shows. So, and I don't make any apologies for that. So we're hanging out, having fun, and talking. That's kind of the point. The fact that we're clipping counters is incidental, and the scotch is really there to keep me talking, keep me relaxed. So, I still have not watched all of Deep Space Nine. I'd really like to, but I mean, I watched Babylon 5 religiously, and it was pretty transparent to us that it was at some point began to copy Babylon 5. Enterprise was better than people gave it credit for. A lot of people really objected to that very sappy theme song, and that spoiled it for them. I think there was like a bad run in Enterprise around season 3 or something like that the show ultimately killed the show, even though it recovered from it. So there's that. But I mean, I liked the cast, everything. The whole first season was pretty good, I thought. I am reasonably sure I would like DS9 if I got into it. They're like 26 episode seasons. It's a huge friggin' project. Stargate, I stopped watching Stargate around season 7 and never watched much of Atlantis. I did like what I saw of Universe, even though it was a very different show. But I thought Stargate was, I mean, who cares about the movie? The show was way better than the movie. The show had this sort of meticulously, episode by episode, built-up universe. They did a wonderful job of world-building in it. I didn't see the later seasons, but it was on like 10 or 11 seasons. That's incredible for a sci-fi program, especially on Sci-Fi, which is like historically had a tremendous allergy to quality stuff. If it was good and it was on Sci-Fi, then somebody at Sci-Fi made a mistake and probably got fired. Panzerblitz and Panzer later dated? Yes, absolutely. I have not watched Succession, and I have no particular interest in that, even though I do like Brian Cox a lot. Sopranos had a lot of humor in it, though. Remember when they had no redeeming characters, but that's just one element, right? There's a ton of humor in, I mean, just the way Tony talked was funny. But, Christopher and Paulie gets trapped in a car out in the woods and have to survive by eating freaking ketchup packets for an episode. I mean, that's hilarious. So, Space 1999. I do remember that as a kid, And it always seemed very adult. Not adult as in like the, adult as we know now sense, but adult as in like seemed like it was above my head. And if I rewatched it now, I'm not sure if I would get it, or if I thought it was still above my head, or if I thought it was just bad. It was an interesting show, and you gotta love Martin Landau and Barbara Bain too, so The Shield was really good. Best Star Trek Next Gen movie is clearly First Contact. I liked all of them except Nemesis, which I thought was absolute shit. But Generations was okay. It wasn't great, but it was like the handoff movie, so, it's got some cool things in it. And it's got Malcolm McDowell, who's always great. And I thought Insurrection was good, actually. Did it feel like a long episode of Next Gen? Yeah, but it was like a pretty good episode. I could live with that. And it's got F. Murray Abraham as the villain. They're clearly trying to, have the next Khan. They've been trying to do that the whole time, and it really hasn't worked. Eric Bana probably came the closest to that actually working in any of the movies. And it wasn't that close. Doug mentions the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant. I read that as a teenager. And yeah, I'm not reading that again. I do think that it ended real strong, but Thomas Covenant is not an appealing character. Just absolute shitbag. So Blake Seven is awesome based on the writing and some of the characters. There's some really good characters that just really in rhythm with the writers on that episode. Or on that show, I should say. And I haven't seen that much Blake Seven, but there's some really good stuff there. Logan's Run. That's a great movie, too, actually. For years, there's been talk of that getting remade, and that's never happened. I vaguely remember the Logan's Run TV show, which was probably not very good, thinking about it. A lot of Stephen R. Donaldson is a slog, frankly. I've read 2 Thomas Covenant series and the Gap series from him. And I don't know. I mean, I feel in retrospect like it was a slog, but then I managed to read like friggin' 11 books of his. So maybe it wasn't that bad. I mean, I'm not going to spoil anybody on anything here, but if you got Amazon Prime and you like sci-fi television, please watch The Expanse. Please stick with it until like mid-second season, and you're gold. Okay, even if you feel like it starts a little slow, and it does kind of start slow in the first couple episodes. So this current season is season 6. It's a shorter season. It's going to be the last season, at least for now. And it basically will cover up to the end of the 6th book. If you want to read the books the books are good too, but frankly, the books are good sci-fi. As sci-fi books, the show is fucking amazing sci-fi for sci-fi television. That is not a statement that says the show is better than the books, but in relation to the rest of its medium, the show shines far brighter than the books do. The Rockford Files was actually a really good show, actually. I hate police procedurals. They bore me. Have I watched a ton of them? Yeah, because it's like the most common format on television. I find them dreadfully uninteresting and boring. So there are a number of amazing scenes. That's one of my that Amos scene is specifically one of my favorite scenes. On the other hand, Crime Story with Dennis Farina, that was a cool show, actually. I remember that. Season, I'll tell you this, Scott. Season 5 has the best space battle anywhere ever. I am not exaggerating that. It is the best space battle anywhere ever. And part of that is that you have just spent all this time investing in these characters, all of whom are involved in this space battle. It is awesome. I will let you discover it for yourself. So the way the Expanse is set up is one of the kind of key characters. In the first book, there's like 2 points of view. There's Holden and there's Joe. And Holden is, and the way that it's really written by 2 authors, Ty Frank and Daniel Abraham. And Daniel Abraham writes Joe Miller, and Ty Frank writes James Holden, and at that point, Daniel Abraham had a lot more writing experience. So if you read the first book, the Joe Miller, who's the detective guy, stuff seems much better than the James Holden stuff. But by the second book, they're much more even, and then things happen. But there is a detective story that kind of opens it up with Joe Miller. And Thomas Jane as Joe Miller is just fantastic, too. So, and he has come back to the series to direct now a couple episodes. So there's that. I should really try to watch The Wire. I think I can watch that on Amazon Prime. HBO's Rome was awesome, by the way. They really kind of overcompressed, especially the second season, when they figured out that they weren't getting the third season. But it was really good. It cost an obscene amount of money at the time. A lot of the HBO stuff, the series, have been really good. I mean, the True Blood's really good. Even Sex and the City, which is emphatically not my thing, is a great show. I just don't like it. Deadwood was great. I've heard really good things about The Wire, and I think I've watched 1 episode of it, and I really probably need to give it another couple of episodes. But I'd also have to start over at this point. Forever Night. Oh my God. That was terrible. That was worse than the Highlander TV show, which was on like 6 seasons or something like that. Dark Matter was pretty neat. I mean, it was not as polished a show as something you'd see on HBO, but it was actually a pretty fun show. HBO's Chernobyl really was amazing. Also, man, it's very heavy. Very heavy material, but it's really good. The Americans is really good, too. Actually, good call on that. The Justified is based on Elmore Leonard stuff. If so, I may have to give that a shot. Is that an AMC property? Ascension. Ascension was that thing with Tricia Helfer on Netflix. Am I remembering that correctly? Because that looked pretty stupid. The other thing with Starbuck on Netflix also, I tried to watch, and that was pretty stupid. One of these days I'll circle back to The Wire. John Adams was really good too, actually. That's a mini series. If we're talking about mini series, then HBO's From the Earth to the Moon was really good. Great cast in John Adams as well. Well, who wants to watch Deadwood without the cursing? That seems pointless. I mean, it was musical in Deadwood, just the cursing. Fringe, I thought, was ludicrous. I'll be honest, I didn't get into it. I found the characters to be unbelievable and highly punchable until John Noble shows up. Then he's awesome. He was the only thing worth watching in that show, and possibly Leonard Nimoy, who shows up later, but. Justified is on FX, apparently, which probably means I ain't watching it. Eureka was fun. I mean, if you were taking Eureka that seriously, then that was your fault. Yeah, I mean, they were actually writing the the dialogue in blank verse on Deadwood, so that's why it felt like that. William Aarons, you are no fun. You have entered the no fun zone. I understand, John. So, Man in the High Castle, I still have not finished season 1. It's really good, but it also reads to me as really heavy, and I have not been in the mood for that and had the time to get into it at the same time. Maybe after The Expanse, which is going to end in 2 weeks. Yes, it's based on the Philip K. Dick book. It is a Nazis win World War II and divide America with the Japanese, and then the plot starts there. I am not sure how closely it sticks. It sticks vaguely to the book, but I think that's a correct statement. Vaguely close to the book. It got like 4 seasons. It's done now. I know that. They get super into the alternate universe thing, from what I understand, and that is a thing that was kind of a side inference in the book. It wasn't like something that was really explored. I have Turn on my wish list as well. I'd like to watch that. I may yet check that out. There's also that. Is that the Washington Spies series? Because that actually looks kind of cool. I think we're talking about the same thing. Nathan Lander asks, are there any games that cover the Mediterranean theater? So I think there's an S&T game called Mare Nostrum. That I think I'm remembering the title correctly, that goes for about $150 now. That's got a fairly good, unlike many S&T games from the Decision era, it's got a pretty good reputation. There's also the I mean, if you're talking about specific parts of the Mediterranean, like North Africa, then yeah, there's tons of games. Italy, not so many. Sicily, there's more. Not very much on Operation Exporter, as you'd expect. And then there's the naval part of the Med. So I really think that if it's the Med you want, maybe Mare Nostrum is the thing. Now I also there's a Med World War II game that's kind of based on or reminiscent of Axis and Allies that's in development for somebody that's going to get kickstarted sometime this year. So keep an eye on that. I watched, I think, the first 2 seasons of Westworld, which were very good. I didn't get to the 3rd season, and I understand it was not as good. I watched the new Matrix. It was okay. It's super meta. It's like, there's like well, go ahead and watch it. None of the action scenes are nearly as good as they were in the old movies, right? Even the not as mind-blowing ones in the 2nd and 3rd movies. None of the action scenes in that movie are very good. There is one particular scene where you can really tell that Keanu Reeves has spent like the last 20 years doing action movies and fight training, and then they don't take advantage of that at all in any other scene. So it would be reasonable to say I found it slightly disappointing, but my expectations were very modest. Ty Bomba is in a way my favorite wargame designer because he saves me tons of money by making games that I don't want to play. That is not an indictment of Ty Bomba as a designer particularly. It's just that he chooses topics that I'm not interested in, many of which are hypothetical topics. Shifting Sands, that's just does that cover East Africa too? That's interesting if it does. So David Imperato mentions the Clash of Arms. So that's Struggle for Europe, and it's a 3-volume set. The East Front is War Without Mercy. The West Front is Brute Force, and the Mediterranean is called, very creatively, the Mediterranean. But the Mediterranean is not playable by itself. It's an add-on. You need the other 2 to play it. So I'm not sure it's quite what we'd be looking for in that case. Yeah, I mean, I was reasonably pleased and entertained by the new Matrix. It was okay. It wasn't great. It certainly didn't blow my pants off in any sense. But the Matrix, the first one, was so popular that there was no way there was not going to be a sequel. But I mean, neither of the other two were close to as good as the first one. Let alone, you know, the kind of epic defining, you know, there's, you know, how many movies came out after that either tried to copy its visual effects or tried to copy its sort of metaphysical underpinnings or tried to copy its sort of virtual reality type aesthetic. Hugely influential movie. And it's very difficult to follow that up with something that doesn't end up being disappointing. So I can't blame them too much, but Matrix 2 and 3 were fairly disappointing. This one was like, my expectations were modest. I was entertained. You know, I didn't go see it in the theater. I watched it at home on HBO Max. And I'm pretty comfortable with that. It was worth the $15 for a month to do that. Now, the Hornblower series is really good if you get the chance to watch that. I wonder if that's available on streaming anywhere. We briefly talked about this week's topic. Sort of, kind of. Ugh. There's a really cool meta element in the new Matrix that if I explain, I will probably ruin it for you. So I do recommend watching it. Okay. Now we will be streaming tomorrow with Dan. Remember, it's at 7:30, and I'll have a title card up in the morning for that show. It's 7:30 tomorrow. No show on Wednesday. That is a permanent schedule shift. So I would like to thank everybody for stopping by. I think we topped out at 109, looks like, this week, which is pretty good, especially considering we did a retread topic that we didn't stick to very closely. So, and it's, you know, it's winter. It's people probably still recovering from the holidays. So please do, if you want to help support the channel, please check out the links in the video description to the Patreon, the merch store, and the Ko-Fi. There's shirts that I'm really happy with. There's also coffee mugs that I'm also really happy with, and hoodies that you can't get. So sorry about that. That's Spring's fault. But we will be thanking channel patrons in the instructional series. Like I said, I've got the first episode scripted. I'm going to start on the second episode, which might be way shorter. I don't know, but that's a structural thing. The number of episodes is flexible based on the amount of wordage that I spend on these things, and then I got to start putting the slides together. I have actual experts to vet the scripts for me, so we will hopefully not say anything super stupid. So stay tuned for that. My idea, I'm not promising a specific date or anything, but my idea is that I'd like to get them out starting this month, but we'll see how that works out. We have an unboxing video scheduled already for Thursday. I'd like to do one for Friday and Saturday as well. I have them in the box. I just need to do the editing, which of course is the most time-consuming part of the whole process. So, all right, so this has been a great chat tonight. I would like to thank everybody for showing up. We will be back with possibly a more exciting topic next Monday. We'll have to come up with a topic for tomorrow because I have no idea. I'll have to actually come up with it before 5 minutes before the show this time. But again, tune in tomorrow for the show with Dan. That is on this channel, not over at No Enemies Here. And otherwise, I will see everybody next week. Thanks for stopping by.